Who were the worst presidents of the United States? Political scientists, historians, and other scholars occasionally rank the commanders-in-chief of the United States, and some individuals consistently rank at the bottom of the list. The 2024 Presidential Greatness Project Expert Survey released an updated ranking with President Trump at the bottom. The median age of Americans is almost 40, so including presidents from the last 4 decades may introduce bias. Bad presidential leadership includes the inability to decide, corruption within an administration, placing favoritism for people or issues over the country's best interests, or relying on rhetoric instead of firm policy. This video examines the 5 worst presidents that most of us haven't lived through. 45 people have served as president, with Grover Cleveland filling 2 non-consecutive terms, counting as the 22nd and 24th presidents. Looking at the 5 worst in the list, excluding the most recent, number 40 is Warren Harding. He ranks as one of the worst presidents of the United States due to his administration's corruption. During his presidency, Harding appointed several of his old friends, some of whom were corrupt, to significant positions. The Teapot Dome scandal transpired under his watch, in which the government leased oil reserves to private companies in a swap for bribes. Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall eventually went to prison. The director of the Veterans Bureau, Charles Forbes, allowed the sale of drugs and alcohol from hospitals, some of which contractors built after making payoffs. Forbes went to prison too. Many of his friends, known as the Ohio Gang, stayed in the president's favor by enjoying leisurely activities with him, such as poker. Additionally, Harding failed to take action on important issues, such as racial inequality and labor unrest. Controversy haunted his presidency, and his reputation suffered even more after his death when more information about the scandals became public. William Henry Harrison, at number 41, also holds the shortest term of office due to his death at 31 days in 1841. In addition to his brief presidency, critics fault the vagueness of his leadership, as he planned to defer to Congress and that his speeches cast him in the opposite light. He came from a wealthy family but portrayed himself as a common man. Harrison criticized partisanship and entrenched politicians, but he had served as a territorial governor and a member of Congress, plus he seemed to tout the Whig Party line. Furthermore, the 9th president represented the forced removal of Native Americans from their lands. Harrison's victory at the Battle of Tippecanoe gave him fame and a claim to leadership, but showed his preference for settlers over Native Americans. However, in fairness, he needed more time to prove whether he could change his mind on issues or establish himself as an administrator. Number 42, Franklin Pierce was elected in 1852 as a dark horse or relatively unknown candidate. A series of fateful decisions and events marked his presidency. Pierce supported the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which permitted the growth of slavery into new territories and led to increased tensions between the abolitionist North and the slaveholding South. His handling of the Bleeding Kansas crisis, in which pro- and anti-slavery forces clashed over the territory's future, received plenty of criticism. Additionally, the 14th president had a weak foreign policy, as he failed to annex Cuba, and the acquisition of the Gadsden Territory from Mexico further drove a wedge over the issue of slavery. Finally, his support of a pro-Southern agenda contributed to the onset of the Civil War. Experts believe his presidency lacked leadership, had poor decision-making, and failed to address his time's pressing issues. Andrew Johnson, ranked 43, took office after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and inherited the task of rebuilding the country after the Civil War. However, his policies and actions were often controversial and divisive. Among his most notable failures were his vetoes of civil rights legislation, his opposition to Reconstruction efforts in the South, and his clashes with Congress, ultimately leading to his impeachment. The 17th president violated the Tenure of Office Act when he fired Secretary of War Edwin Stanton without permission. The trial in the Senate failed to garner the 2/3 required vote, but it further weakened Johnson. He faced criticism for his racist views and his inability to unite the country during a time of great turmoil and division. James Buchanan is widely considered the worst president in American history due to his inability to prevent the secession of southern states and ultimately the outbreak of the Civil War. His diplomatic service made his political positions less certain. He could not make firm decisions and failed to adequately address the issue of slavery, worsening the tensions between the North and the South. President-elect Buchanan exacerbated the stress over slavery by becoming involved in Scott versus Sanford by seeming to influence the Supreme Court's decision. Buchanan supported the pro-slavery faction in Kansas, known as the Lecompton government, and a ruling in favor of slavery in the Scott case would bolster their position. Buchanan corresponded with Supreme Court members, including Justice Robert Greer, a fellow Pennsylvanian, inquiring about the final ruling. Buchanan naively hoped the Supreme Court's decision would bring a close to the issue. Instead, the court ruled African Americans, such as Dred Scott, could not hold citizenship and that the Constitution protected property rights. Additionally, his administration experienced economic catastrophes and scandals, further tarnishing his reputation as a president. The so-called Panic of 1857 involved the collapse of banks and businesses. As orthodox thinking dictated, Buchanan believed the government had little to no role outside monetary policy. Industry-heavy northern states suffered more severely. Scandals involved several members of Buchanan's cabinet, including Secretary of War John B. Floyd, who took advantage of their positions to enrich allies at the expense of the public. Floyd eventually resigned, and more sufficient evidence came out after his death. The Congressional Co-Vote Committee attempted to uncover partisan favoritism in awarding contracts, bribes, and fraud, but officials at various levels blocked cooperation. Continuing violence in Kansas over the question of slavery finally got Buchanan to act, but he threw his support to the pro-slavery faction when he called for statehood. Due to the divisiveness of the action, it remained a territory until 1861. No great call existed to have Buchanan serve a second term, and he told his successor that he was happy to return home. That successor, Abraham Lincoln, won without support from the South. So before his inauguration, beginning with South Carolina, the Deep South seceded from the Union. Instead of taking decisive action to prevent secession and preserve the Union, Buchanan employed a passive approach, arguing that secession was illegal but that he had no power to stop it, believing that Southern leaders would compromise. As cabinet members left, he aligned more with Northerners and asked for the resupply of Fort Sumter in South Carolina, but the 15th president's late action had little consequence. Do any modern presidents you've lived through belong at the bottom of this list? Do the explanations warrant the placement of Harding, Harrison, Pierce, Johnson, or Buchanan? I'm Mr. Frederick Scott Smith. Have a good day. I know I will.